She spoke the forbidden ancient language. The alien priest dropped his staff in shock. Emily Parker stood at the edge of the crystalline valley, trying to calm the restless spin of her thoughts while the twin moons cast shifting light over the temple skyline. Even after weeks of linguistic immersion aboard the Horizon, she still felt unprepared for what the Velo High Council had summoned her to witness. The shimmering towers of the alien world rose like frozen lightning bolts, their luminous surfaces pulsing with inner radiance that made the whole horizon look alive, as if the city itself breathed alongside its inhabitants. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Emily adjusted her translator device, more out of nervous habit than necessity, and tried rehearsing a few formal greetings under her breath before realizing her throat felt tight, the words catching the way they always did when she knew people were watching. It didn't help that she was the only human for 20 light years, nor that she was about to step into a ceremony no outsider had ever been invited to attend. She wondered again how a simple linguist had ended up carrying the weight of an unprecedented cultural moment, and why the Velo High Council believed she had a role in something that felt older than any human civilization could comprehend. The memories of how it had begun flashed through her mind in a blur of voices and flickering holograms. 3 months earlier, aboard the Horizon, she had been surrounded by projections of Velic glyphs glowing in shades of cerulean light, each symbol twisting with layered meaning she'd spent years trying to decode. She'd been chewing on a stylus, hair scraped up in a messy bun, when Ryan Mitchell appeared in the doorway like a messenger carrying bad news he hadn't yet figured out how to soften. His usual confident stance felt stiff, and the tension in his voice made her straighten even before he spoke. "The captain wants you on the bridge," he'd said, and Emily's pulse had stuttered because captains never called linguists to the bridge unless something extraordinary was unfolding. She'd asked if he knew the reason, but Ryan had only shrugged, saying the Velo High Council had contacted them directly and requested a human representative for a ceremony they refused to explain through traditional channels. Emily had followed him through the brightly lit corridors, each step echoing the weight of what direct contact with one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations could mean. When she reached the bridge, Captain Ethan Cole stood rigid before the view screen, staring at an image that made Emily's breath catch in her chest. A Veloan elder appeared with iridescent scales that shifted like oil on water, their multifaceted eyes glimmering with a depth that felt less like observation and more like evaluation. Emily had performed the traditional greeting with trembling fingers, hoping she'd remembered every angle correctly. The elder acknowledged her gesture with an elegant head tilt before speaking in their layered, musical tongue. "Your understanding of our ways is admirable," they had said, and Emily had nearly sagged with relief when she realized she'd interpreted their intonation correctly. The elder announced the approaching Ceremony of Echoes, a sacred event occurring only once in 10,000 cycles, and declared that a human must attend. They didn't explain why, only that she, specifically, had been chosen. Emily had tried to argue she wasn't a diplomat, but Captain Cole insisted she was their best option, especially since the Velisons had made the request with unmistakable specificity. Those hectic days leading to her departure blurred into memory as Emily followed the young guide, Kira, through the flowing architecture of Valos Now. The Veloan shuttle that had carried her from the Horizon had been a seamless marvel, gliding through space as if it carved its path from light rather than gravity. Kira, with bright blue scales that suggested youth, had surprised her by speaking flawless English and by describing her species' linguistic study of humanity with a kind of respectful curiosity rather than arrogance. During their journey, Emily had tried to pry details about the ceremony from Kira, but her guide kept deflecting with phrases that meant little and implied much, saying the Ceremony of Echoes connected past and future, and that the words used were older than even their earliest records. The evasiveness only increased Emily's anxiety, making her fear she'd unwittingly walk into a ritual with rules she didn't fully understand. Yet the planet's beauty overwhelmed those nerves when they descended toward Valos, revealing purple oceans and amber continents glowing beneath the alignment of 3 moons, moving slowly toward a configuration seen only once across millennia. The capital city had been unlike anything Emily had imagined, with crystal spires bending like living structures and bridges of light connecting platforms floating effortlessly in the air. Even now, standing under the vast shadow of the Grand Temple of Vows, she felt dwarfed by the sheer scale of the civilization that had invited her. Kira led her through the bustling streets, filled with Velisons wearing robes of shifting hues, each traveler adding to the sense of cosmic anticipation. Everywhere she looked, Emily saw signs of preparation. Clusters of citizens practicing melodic chants, decorations blooming from living vines woven into architecture, and processions moving with synchronized grace she could only envy. When she finally reached her quarters, the room shifted temperature and lighting to accommodate her human biology, leaving her unsettled by how seamlessly the environment responded. She'd spent the night trying to rest, but instead dreamed of ancient voices calling out in tongues she nearly recognized, as if her mind had been tracing forgotten patterns left buried in humanity's distant past. The audience with the High Council the next morning intensified Emily's unease. The circular chamber soared so high that sound echoed with strange clarity, each whisper carrying a soft harmonic that made her translator struggle. 12 Veloan elders hovered in floating chairs, their gazes fixed on her with unreadable expressions. Elder Thal greeted her with formality, praising her dedication to studying their culture. Emily responded with precise linguistic gestures she had practiced relentlessly, aware each movement carried symbolic undertones. But the council members exchanged glances when she finished, as if evaluating something deeper than her performance. Another elder, one with reddish scales, spoke about ancient records suggesting humanity held relevance to the ceremony. Emily had sputtered in confusion, insisting humans were a young spacefaring species with no historical connection to the Velisons. Yet Elder Thal's cryptic reply lingered in her thoughts long after she left the chamber. Age is not the measure of significance, they had said, as though hinting at truths lost to both civilizations. The following days became a whirlwind of preparation as Kira guided her through rituals, recitations, and ceremonial movements required for her role. Emily struggled with ancient words whose tonal complexities defied rational linguistic structure, especially when Kira explained that even most Velisons didn't understand the original meanings anymore. Their oldest language had fossilized into ceremonial phrases, valued more for rhythm than semantics, which both fascinated and terrified Emily. How could she perform accurately when even native speakers admitted the origins were shrouded in millennia of myth? Yet Kira insisted intention mattered more than precision, urging Emily to let the sounds flow through her as if they carried their own memory. Emily wasn't sure she believed such poetic logic until the night before the ceremony, when an unexpected visitor entered her room without a sound. The elder, named Maya, their pale scales glowing faintly under the moonlight, introduced themselves as a scholar of ancient languages who had joined the priesthood long ago. Their quiet voice carried a gravity that made Emily instantly attentive. Maya produced a small device like a refined version of her translator, projecting an array of glyphs into the air, symbols that twisted with elegant curves and geometric anchor points unlike any written system Emily recognized. Maya explained these inscriptions had been discovered in a temple that predated Veloan recorded history, estimated at least 70,000 years old, carved long before structured civilizations emerged on Valos. Emily had leaned closer instinctively, tracing visual patterns and searching for order. Something about the glyphs tugged at her mind, like an echo of a language she had never heard yet somehow sensed in the farthest edges of memory. Maya explained that these symbols were believed to be recited at the final stage of the ceremony of echoes, meant to bridge the gap between what had been forgotten and what might be revealed. They added that certain structural similarities existed between these glyphs and very early human linguistic patterns, similarities Emily specifically had studied. Emily had protested, insisting humans and Velisons evolved light years apart. But Maya only smiled with ancient patience and told her the universe held mysteries beyond linear reasoning. They asked her only to keep the symbols in mind during the ceremony and to listen with more than her trained intellect. After Maya left, Emily sat on her balcony while the blood moon washed the city in a crimson glow, feeling as though the symbols were rearranging themselves in her mind. She barely slept, waking repeatedly to the sense of forgotten words she should have known. When dawn approached, the atmosphere on Valos vibrated with expectation as the 3 moons aligned perfectly for the first time in 10,000 cycles. Kira arrived to escort Emily to the Temple of Echoes, a structure that seemed grown rather than built, its crystal walls humming faintly like distant chimes. Inside, sound carried with unnatural clarity, every footstep ringing like a note in a vast instrument. The circular chamber housed a raised dais at its center, holding a pool of liquid silver that shimmered as if alive. Representatives from other species gathered nearby, each bearing expressions of awe or apprehension. They had assembled not out of obligation, but because the Velisons had insisted this ceremony held universal importance. The High Council members entered with solemn grace, followed by priests wearing multicolored robes that glowed with internal luminescence. The High Priest, a towering figure whose scales shifted through every hue imaginable, lifted a crystalline staff that radiated pulsing light. Emily felt her breath catch as the ceremony began with haunting music played on instruments shaped from resonating crystal. The liquid pool responded to the tones, rippling in synchronized patterns that seemed almost communicative. The High Priest spoke in ancient Veloan, intoning words that resonated in the chamber like a chorus of voices layered across time. Emily recited the trained responses, her voice blending with thousands of others as the ritual unfolded with swirling chants and synchronized movements. Yet beneath the ritual beauty, she sensed a building pressure, a mental vibration that felt almost like a door trying to open in her mind. The glyphs Maya had shown her flickered at the edges of her perception, rearranging themselves into possible interpretations she couldn't quite grasp. When the chamber darkened, and only the staff and the silver pool illuminated the dais, she felt the air thicken with a sensation that was not entirely physical. The High Priest raised the staff as the liquid rose into a column of silver light, forming images of Veloan ancestors that shifted like memories suspended in fluid time. The crowd murmured in awe, but their surprise grew when the images suddenly changed, showing ancient humans performing rituals eerily similar to the one unfolding now. Confusion swept through the Velisons, their harmonics trembling with fear or disbelief. Then the column collapsed, the pool bubbling violently before a voice emerged. Not Veloan, but ancient, guttural, and unmistakably human. Emily froze as the hair on her arms rose. She recognized the structure instantly. It was Proto-Indo-European, and she understood every word. Emily's voice trembled as she repeated the translation, the words echoing through the crystalline chamber with a weight far heavier than their simplicity suggested. The circle closes. The separated children return. What was sundered becomes whole. The moment she spoke them aloud, a silence swept over the temple, so complete that even the ever-present hum of the crystal architecture seemed to pause, as if the entire structure held its breath. Thousands of Velisons stared at her with stunned expressions, their harmonics vibrating with disbelief. The High Priest stepped forward with a rigid stillness that signaled deep shock, their iridescent eyes reflecting the swirl of light still flickering in the disturbed pool. Emily felt exposed beneath their gaze, yet something inside her was steady, as if the voice from the pool had spoken to a part of herself she had never known existed. She waited for someone to challenge her, to accuse her of fabricating the translation, but instead the High Priest whispered a single word, "Impossible," before their staff slipped from their trembling hands and shattered against the dais floor. The pool bubbled again, releasing a resonance that caused the air itself to shimmer. The shifting liquid rose once more, forming patterns that no longer resembled Veloan or human images, but something older, more primal. When a voice spoke again, it wasn't in Proto-Indo-European or any language Emily recognized. And yet, somewhere deep within her, patterns began to form, connections blossoming like constellations aligning. She couldn't explain how she understood, only that her mind seemed to shape meaning out of sound the way a musician might instinctively recognize a forgotten melody. She felt lightheaded, her pulse racing, but the pull toward understanding consumed her. Speaking of origins, Emily said, her voice tight with awe, of beings who crossed the stars long before our histories began, guiding life on multiple worlds. It says separation was necessary, but reunion was inevitable, written into the structure of who we are. A ripple of disbelief moved through the assembled crowd. The high priest seemed frozen between reverence and fear, their shoulders trembling as they asked how she could interpret what even their oldest scholars had failed to decode. Emily didn't know how to answer. The words came to me, she said quietly, as if they weren't new but remembered. The moment she said it, the column of silver surged again, rising higher than before, forming new symbols suspended in luminous fluid. This time, the shapes locked into a configuration she recognized instantly. The ancient glyph Maya had shown her, along with several others that had haunted her dreams. She gasped without meaning to, and the sound echoed sharply, drawing every gaze toward her again. The high priest stared at her with a mixture of awe and terror, as though seeing her for the first time. "You respond as though you were born to these words," they said. No outsider could speak the first tongue with such instinct. Emily opened her mouth to argue, but the liquid erupted once more, growing into a clear image of a star map. The entire chamber inhaled collectively as the intricate network of luminous pathways unfolded above the dais, linking dozens of star systems with sweeping arcs of silver. At one end of the map was Earth, glowing softly like a memory rediscovered. At another was Valos, its outline pulsing with recognition. But at the center lay a star system she didn't recognize, marked with a symbol identical to the strange glyph that had lingered in the pool's final vision. Maya's voice broke the silence, trembling with emotion as they whispered, the birthplace, the cradle of all sentient life, the home world spoken of only in legend. Emily watched in stunned fascination as the map shifted, showing colossal starships departing from that central world in ancient times. The vessels flew outward in every direction, releasing streams of particles that drifted toward multiple planets, including Earth and Valos. The next sequence displayed evolutionary stages of countless species, revealing how each had developed along guided paths shaped by subtle intervention rather than chance alone. Scenes of early Velisons and proto-humans appeared side by side, growing from the same foundational templates, yet diverging to suit their respective environments. Emily felt dizzy as the implications settled in her mind. It wasn't just cultural or philosophical connection. It was biological, linguistic, structural. Every intelligent species represented in the temple shared ancestry far older than any recorded history. The High Council members spoke rapidly to one another, their harmonics clashing in a rare display of confusion and agitation. The high priest regained their staff with trembling hands, restored their composure with a slow breath, and then turned to face the assembly. For thousands of cycles, we believed ourselves ancient beyond comparison, they said. We thought the ceremony of echoes bound us only to our own past. But this reveals we are not alone in our lineage, nor are we the oldest among our kind. Emily felt a shiver move through her as the high priest fixed their gaze on her once more. You have unlocked truths hidden for 10 millennia, they said with reverence. Truths even we were unprepared to confront. The voice from the pool spoke, not because of the moons alone, but because you were present to hear it. Emily wanted to protest that she was just a linguist, not some prophetic figure, but the images unfolding above them silenced her. The map shifted once more, showing the central world again, only now it was surrounded by destructive cosmic forces. A neutron star passed close enough to destabilize its sun, triggering solar flares and gravitational disruption. The precursor civilization had faced extinction. The images revealed scientists and elders gathered in ancient halls, urgently planning the seeding project that would spread life among the stars in hopes of preserving their legacy. Emily felt her chest tighten as she realized she was watching the last days of the species that had shaped them all. Their desperation wasn't selfish, it was parental. Everything they had created, the languages, the genetics, the rituals, had been designed not just to survive, but to eventually reunite their children across the galaxy. The silver column flickered, revealing one last message in a language that blended patterns from both ancient Veloan and Proto-Indo-European. Emily recognized the merging structure, and part of her understood instinctively. It speaks of a cycle fulfilled, she translated softly, that those who were scattered have come together again, completing a design meant to bridge worlds. It says the next age begins when the children reclaim the home of their ancestors. The high priest bowed their head, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had been revealed. The ceremony of echoes has never shown prophecy with such clarity, they murmured. We are witnessing the awakening of history itself. The silver pool settled slowly, its luminous surface returning to stillness with a gentle shimmer. The temple remained silent, except for the uneven breaths of thousands trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Elder Thal stepped forward with measured calm, their gaze sweeping across the gathering of species. This revelation is not solely for Valos, they said. It belongs to every world touched by the precursor's design. We must call a convocation, representatives from all known spacefaring civilizations. The truth must be shared. Emily watched as the elders exchanged solemn nods, their harmonics steadying as purpose replaced shock. When her eyes turned to her again, she felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't step back. The elder's voice softened. Dr. Parker, you may have begun this journey as a scholar of languages, but now you stand as bridge between civilizations. Without you, the meanings would have remained lost. Kira approached her with a mixture of pride and awe, placing one hand against their chest in the Veloan gesture of respect. Your voice carried across the veil, they said. The ancestors responded because they recognized you. Emily swallowed hard, unsure how to process the mounting expectations around her. She wanted to deny it, but the certainty in Kira's tone unsettled her more than the ceremony itself. She was used to deciphering patterns, not becoming part of them. Yet somewhere deep within, the ancient words still reverberated, as if her mind held a key she had never known to search for. The crowd slowly dispersed, though many paused to stare at her with reverence or curiosity. Representatives from other species approached cautiously, their translators attempting to bridge the many linguistic divides. Some congratulated her, while others simply asked if she could help interpret patterns in their own languages that now seemed suspiciously familiar. Emily felt overwhelmed by the attention, but Kira gently helped guide her toward the exit before the weight of the moment swallowed her whole. Outside, the red light of the blood moon had softened to a muted glow, and the city felt strangely hushed, as if even its living architecture was processing the revelation. Later, back in her chambers, Emily collapsed onto the edge of her bed, staring out at the city's crystalline towers glittering in the shifting lunar light. Everything she had ever studied felt both validated and shattered. The Velisons weren't just foreign beings with an ancient culture. They were part of the same cosmic lineage as humanity. The glyphs she had encountered weren't random artifacts, but echoes of a shared origin. For years, she had believed language evolved independently across species as a product of environment and cognitive structure. Now she knew it was also inheritance, passed down from ancestors whose voices still whispered through rituals like the ceremony of echoes. She heard the door chime softly before it opened, and Maya stepped inside with the quiet grace of someone who carried centuries of knowledge in their movements. Their pale scales glowed faintly, reflecting moonlight like distant stars. I sense your thoughts were restless, they said. Such revelations reshape not just civilizations, but individuals. Emily managed a weak smile. That's one way to put it. How do you feel? Like the universe just handed me a puzzle that's been missing half its pieces, she admitted. And now it wants me to solve it in front of an audience. Maya chuckled gently. You were never chosen at random, Emily Parker. The ceremony responded to you because your mind recognizes the ancient patterns. They sat beside her, projecting the same ancient glyphs again. Do you see the similarity now? The structural symmetry? Emily nodded slowly, unable to deny the connections. The precursors left linguistic fingerprints, she said quietly. Across species, across millennia, hidden in plain sight. Maya's eyes softened with pride. And you're the first to hear them clearly in ages. Emily exhaled shakily. What happens now? Now, Maya said, the galaxy learns the truth. And you help guide that understanding. Whether you intended to or not, you have become the echo bearer. The title struck Emily like a blow and yet resonated deeply, fitting in a way she couldn't explain. She turned toward the city again, feeling the convergence of countless destinies pulling her forward. The ceremony of echoes had not ended. It had only begun. The convocation called by the Velo High Council assembled faster than any gathering Emily had ever imagined possible. Messages spread across the sector through diplomatic channels and ancient alliances, summoning species who had rarely stood together in the same room, let alone collaborated on matters of shared destiny. The revelation from the ceremony of echoes had rippled outward with seismic force, reaching worlds where scholars, priests, scientists, and leaders struggled to comprehend the idea that their origins might be intertwined with those of strangers they had long kept at arm's length. Emily spent the days leading up to the convocation in an uneasy cycle of preparation and reflection, aware that the role thrust upon her was expanding far beyond anything she had ever sought. Kira stayed close, offering reassurance through calm gestures and soothing harmonics that reminded Emily of soft chimes resonating across crystalline cliffs. But even Kira couldn't shield her from the enormity of what was coming, nor the growing recognition from visiting delegates who had begun calling her the Echo Bearer. The first day of the convocation was held in a grand amphitheater carved directly into a crystal mountain overlooking Valo's capital. Thousands of delegates gathered under a shifting ceiling of refracted light that scattered rainbows across the tiers. Emily found a place among the human delegation, though she felt uncomfortably aware of the Velison's expectation that she would speak at some point. Captain Cole appeared through a holographic link projected near her seat, their communication delayed only slightly by distance. He regarded her with a mixture of pride and concern, leaning forward as if he wished he could physically stand beside her. "You're making history out there, Emily," he said. "Humanity owes you a debt we can't begin to measure." Emily shook her head, trying not to feel the weight of his words settle on her shoulders. "I just repeated what I heard," she said. "The real history is older than all of us. I only happened to be standing close enough when it decided to surface." When the convocation began, Elder Thal stepped forward to address the assembly. Their voice carried through the crystalline acoustics with a melodic clarity that commanded attention from every species present. "For cycles beyond memory, we believed our origins tied only to the ancient myths of Valos," they began. "But the ceremony of echoes has revealed a truth far greater than any we anticipated. A shared ancestry connects us all, written not only in our languages but in the very structure of our being." The amphitheater filled with murmurs in dozens of tongues, translators straining to interpret harmonics, clicks, warbles, and telepathic frequencies into coherent meaning. Emily watched the reactions ripple outward, shock from species with rigid historical traditions, curiosity from those who had long suspected more ancient connections, and apprehension from races who had built political identities around their perceived uniqueness. Elder Thal gestured to the center, where a holographic projection of the star map appeared, the same one Emily had witnessed forming from liquid silver in the ceremonial pool. "This image represents not legend, but documentation," Thal continued. The precursors seeded multiple worlds, guiding evolution while allowing diversity to flourish. Emily listened with fascination as the assembly reacted. The crystalline Laman delegation shifted their bodies to reflect patterns of bright, refracted light, indicating profound contemplation. The towering Drek, encased in their chitin armor, exchanged low-frequency rumbles that suggested agitation. The gaseous vor pulsed within their containment suits like trembling nebulae, absorbing every detail with rapt attention. Then Elder Thal did something Emily hadn't expected. They turned to face her directly, inviting her to stand. The echoes spoke through Dr. Emily Parker, they said. She heard the first tongue and understood what none of us could. Without her voice, these revelations would have remained silent. A hush fell over the amphitheater as thousands of eyes, faceted, rounded, crystalline, luminous, or mechanical, turned toward Emily. Her heart hammered so loudly she wondered if the audio pickups were transmitting it. But she stood anyway, feeling a tremble run through her legs as she approached the projection platform. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than she intended, but the crystalline acoustics carried every syllable clearly. I didn't unlock anything, she said. The ceremony opened because the alignment was right and because you invited us here. I only recognized patterns that connected with my studies. Languages evolve, but they also remember. The murmurs resumed, softer this time, curious rather than skeptical. Emily continued, the words flowing more naturally as she spoke. The voice from the pool used the structure of Proto-Indo-European, a family of languages humans reconstructed through comparative methods. But the deeper patterns, the roots beneath the roots, those aren't human at all. They belong to something older, something shared. She gestured toward the star map. The precursors didn't leave written instructions. They left echoes, linguistic fingerprints, ritual frameworks, harmonic patterns, embedded in our earliest cognitive structures. They planned for this moment, even if none of us knew to look for the signs. A crystalline Laman rose, their body shedding colors that meant inquisitiveness. If this is true, they asked, does that mean every species here carries these hidden patterns? Emily nodded slowly. If your language was shaped by the precursors directly or indirectly, then yes. The patterns might be deeply buried, more abstract than phonetic structures or traditional grammar. But they're there. A low rumble of astonishment swept through the amphitheater. Representatives from dozens of species began checking their archives, whispering excitedly as they compared linguistic data. For the first time since arriving on Valos, Emily felt her fear dissolve, replaced by something steadier, purpose, and a sense of rightful belonging to a story much larger than herself. After the convocation concluded, the High Council convened a smaller, more focused working group composed of linguists, archaeologists, cultural historians, and genetic specialists from every represented species. Emily found herself seated at a large circular table surrounded by beings she had read about in xenolinguistic journals, experts whose names were legends in their fields. The Veloan scholar Maya sat beside her, offering quiet guidance. Across from her sat Dr. Kalen Roro of the Drek Confederacy, their imposing exoskeleton adorned with etched symbols of academic prowess. Next to them hovered a Laman scholar whose crystalline body refracted light into shifting equations. Together, they analyzed fragments of the precursor patterns recovered from the temple glyphs and compared them with linguistic structures from each species' early recorded history. For days, they worked tirelessly, often losing track of time as they uncovered startling parallels. Phonetic patterns from human proto-languages aligned with harmonic sequences in ancient Veloan chants. Syntax structures mirrored the logic used in Laman luminous communication. Even species whose languages relied on color shifts, telepathy, or chemical signals showed traces of foundational architecture shared across civilization lines. Emily felt constantly torn between exhilaration and disbelief. The deeper they delved, the more undeniable the connections became. Each discovery was like uncovering another piece of a puzzle that had been waiting millennia for the right minds to assemble it. But the breakthrough arrived when the group managed to combine multiple linguistic layers into a cohesive reconstruction of what they believed was the first tongue, the original precursor language hinted at during the Ceremony of Echoes. Emily stared at the resulting structure projected above the table, her heart racing. It wasn't simply a language. It was an architecture of meaning, built to interface with diverse cognitive frameworks. It didn't prioritize sound or light or vibration or telepathy. It incorporated all of them. The precursors, Maya whispered with awe, designed a universal mode of communication long before their civilization ended. They meant for every one of their descendant species to rediscover it. Emily felt tears form unexpectedly. It was beautiful, elegant, and heartbreakingly intentional. She traced her fingers through the projection, watching the glyphs ripple in response. "This is it," she said softly, "the key they left behind." The coalition of species worked tirelessly to decode more of the precursor structures. Geneticists found dormant sequences shared across species, like evolutionary invitations waiting to be recognized. Archaeologists unearthed relics that mimicked the star maps Emily had seen, preserved on planets from distant systems. Historians re-examined myths and legends, discovering symbolic references to sky travelers, world shapers, and cycles of separation and return. Every civilization had carried fragments of the truth, hidden within rituals, songs, and ancestral stories. And now, for the first time, they were piecing them together. The search for the precursor home world accelerated as they triangulated the coordinates shown during the ceremony with stellar drift calculations and ancient Veloan records. The central star system displayed in the liquid column had been obscured by nebular matter for millennia, but new long-range sensors from multiple civilizations allowed the coalition to penetrate the dense clouds and identify potential planetary bodies. Excitement rippled through the working group as data streams confirmed the presence of a habitable world matching the environmental signatures of the ancient projections. 6 months after the ceremony, an interspecies expedition vessel launched from Valos with Emily among its primary delegates. The ship was a marvel of combined engineering, blending Veloan crystal technology with direct structural design, Laman luminous circuits, and human navigational systems. As they approached the hidden star system, Emily stood at the observation deck beside Kira and Maya, her chest tightening with anticipation. The star ahead glowed a gentle yellow, reminiscent of Earth's sun, though older and steadier. The vessel detected a planet with atmospheric composition close to the one depicted in the precursor map. As they moved into orbit, they gasped at the sight of sprawling ruins beneath dense vegetation. Cities carved with impossible precision, structures older than recorded history, monuments standing as silent witnesses to a vanished age. Landing on the planet felt surreal. The atmosphere was breathable, though tinged with metallic undertones. The ancient cities sprawled like the skeletons of giants, partially reclaimed by nature, but unmistakably artificial. Emily walked alongside delegates of every represented species, each step echoing a sense of pilgrimage. They descended into subterranean archives protected by time-resistant materials. When they activated dormant interfaces, holographic displays flickered to life, responding to their presence with gentle luminescence. One chamber contained inscriptions mixing structural elements from all their reconstructed linguistic systems, as if the precursors had designed the records to be deciphered only when their descendants reunited. A projection activated, revealing a humanoid figure with blended features, neither human nor Veloan nor Drek, yet somehow familiar to all of them. When it spoke, the sound resonated in Emily's bones. "Greetings, children of the seeding. If you're seeing this, then our legacy has endured. We guided the formation of life across the stars, hoping diversity would flourish where we could no longer survive. We wove patterns into your genes, your cultures, and your languages so that one day you would rediscover your connection." Emily felt tears blur her vision as she listened. The being explained the cosmic catastrophe that had doomed their world and how the seeding project had been their final act of hope. They entrusted the future to those who would come after, believing that unity among their descendant species could accomplish what they never had time to complete. When the message ended, silence enveloped the chamber. Emily placed her hand on the ancient console, feeling warmth pulse beneath her fingertips. The realization settled over her like a dawn that could not be denied. They weren't searching for myth. They were coming home, and the galaxy would never be the same. The days that followed their discovery on the precursor homeworld unfolded with a sense of surreal momentum, as though every moment carried the weight of millennia catching up at once. Emily wandered through halls untouched by living hands for untold ages, each chamber revealing fragments of a civilization that had shaped the destiny of the galaxy long before any modern species took form. The architecture blended organic curves with mathematical precision, as if the buildings themselves had grown from the planet's surface rather than been constructed. Holograms flickered awake as the expedition moved deeper into the complex, projecting scenes from the precursors' lives. Families working together, scholars debating theories, engineers constructing vast vessels meant to survive eons. Emily felt a strange ache while watching the images, sensing not just admiration, but an inexplicable familiarity, like meeting ancestors she never knew she had. Even the cadence of their voices stirred something in her chest, a soft resonance that made her feel as if she had stepped into the memory of a world she had somehow missed by thousands of generations. Each of the 13 species represented on the expedition reacted differently to the revelations. The Drek moved in reverent stillness, their heavy exoskeletal forms unusually quiet as if they feared disturbing the sanctity of the place. The crystalline lamen vibrated in shimmering pulses, absorbing the information with near-overwhelming excitement, their bodies scattering the holographic light in dancing spectrums. The gaseous were shifted colors within their containment suits, swirling with patterns that Emily recognized as symbolic awe. Even the more stoic species, like the armored Naurics or the neural plant hybrids from Laura Prime, seemed deeply affected. Emily watched representatives who had once viewed each other with polite distance, now standing side by side, sharing interpretations and examining relics together. The divisions that had defined interstellar politics for centuries began to blur under the weight of the shared truth. It felt as though every barrier had been constructed atop a foundation none of them understood. And now that foundation had been laid bare, revealing they had all been walking parallel paths toward the same forgotten origin. But what shook Emily the most was discovering how much the precursors had anticipated their descendants' eventual reunion. In one chamber, a massive circular dais activated when scholars from multiple species approached at once, projecting layered symbols that responded to their combined presence. Maya stood beside Emily, their pale blue scales glowing faintly as the symbols rearranged themselves in harmonious rhythm. The language adapts, Maya whispered, off filling their voice. It responds differently based on who engages with it, as though designed to unify perspectives that would otherwise remain isolated. Emily touched the projection, feeling the glyphs ripple in rhythm with her breath, and realized the precursors had woven adaptability into their communication systems. They hadn't created a rigid linguistic monument. They had sculpted living frameworks that evolved with the minds interpreting them. The first tongue wasn't merely a means of conveying information. It was a philosophical invitation, a blueprint for understanding diversity as interconnected rather than contradictory. Late one evening, Emily found herself drawn to an isolated wing of the complex where delicate carvings spiraled across the walls like flowing script. The room was dim, lit only by faint bioluminescent veins running through the stone. She stepped inside with cautious curiosity, tracing the carved patterns that seemed almost familiar. She activated a small console unintentionally, and a holographic interface blossomed before her like a flower opening beneath sunlight. A soft hum filled the chamber as an image materialized. Another precursor figure, though this one younger, with gentler features and warmly glowing eyes. Their voice resonated gently, sounding almost like a lullaby carried through time. These chambers record the emotional philosophies of our people, they explained. The mind must understand not only the structure of knowledge, but the meaning behind it. Emily felt her throat tighten as the figure spoke of unity, not as political agreement, but as kinship, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual alignment across differences. It was a message crafted for beings they would never meet, yet believed would one day return. Maya found her sitting quietly afterward, staring at the empty space where the projection had vanished. "You feel connected to them, don't you?" they asked softly. Emily exhaled shakily, unable to deny it. "It feels like I've been chasing something my entire career," she admitted. "Some pattern I could sense, but never name. And now that I'm here, it's like stepping into the source of every linguistic mystery I've ever studied." Maya nodded with a slow, understanding gesture. "You are not alone in that feeling. Every species here carries echoes within them. Some stronger, some quieter. But your resonance is clearer than most." Emily felt warmth and discomfort mix in her chest. "I don't want to be special," she muttered. "I just wanted to understand things." Maya offered a small, comforting harmonic. Understanding often reveals our place, even if we did not seek it. As the coalition analyzed more records, they discovered detailed star charts marking points of significance across the galaxy. Early seeding sites, experimental biospheres, and long-abandoned outposts that might still contain relics. The records suggested the precursors had not merely seeded life, but monitored its early growth, subtly guiding evolution before withdrawing completely when the process could sustain itself. Emily studied the charts with fascination, realizing many coincided with worlds widely considered cultural cradles among various species. The more she learned, the more she understood the precursors had aimed for diversity, not uniformity. They wanted their descendants to grow differently, argue differently, dream differently, yet still share enough underlying structure to find their way back to each other. Kira spent long stretches of time beside her, sometimes silent, sometimes asking questions that revealed deep introspection. "Do you ever wonder what the precursors wanted from us?" Kira asked one afternoon as they examined a restored holographic rendering of a precursor city. Emily considered the question carefully. "I don't think they wanted obedience or worship," she said. "If anything, they wanted us to grow into something they weren't, to see where their ideas could go after they were gone." Kira tilted their head thoughtfully. "So we are their future, not their replacements." Emily nodded. "Exactly. Legacies evolve. They don't replicate." The coalition eventually uncovered the chamber that held the final message from the precursors, one intended only to activate if their descendants united. The chamber opened with a soft vibration as multiple species stepped inside together, the architecture recognizing shared ancestry. Emily entered with Kira and Maya, standing at the forefront as smaller groups filled in behind them. When the chamber activated, light poured from every surface, coalescing into a vast three-dimensional model of the galaxy. Pathways branched outward like veins of living silver, converging on clusters of worlds that pulsed with faint but unmistakable energy signatures. "The precursor imprint," Maya whispered. "The seeds." Emily watched the glowing markers with growing excitement. Some worlds were inhabited now, others uninhabited, but bearing the unmistakable traces of precursor terraforming. The map implied the seeding project had been far larger than any of them suspected. Dozens, possibly hundreds of sentient species yet unknown might share their origin. Then the final projection appeared, an elder precursor whose features carried the weary grace of a civilization in its final hours. Their voice filled the chamber with gentle solemnity. "To our children who walk the stars, we entrusted our knowledge to the currents of time, believing diversity would strengthen you far beyond our own limitations. You are not meant to find these truths alone. Only in unity do the echoes align." Emily felt the words resonate, as though they were directed straight at her heart. The projection continued, explaining how the precursors had woven safeguards into the universe. Markers, languages, and rituals designed to awaken only when their descendants were ready to stand together without fear or dominance. They spoke of the next phase of the Great Project, not control, but discovery. The knowledge of countless ages was now theirs to explore, reinterpret, and build upon. The chamber dimmed, leaving the coalition in reverent silence. Returning to Valos took several days, during which the vessel became a roving academic symposium. Delegates exchanged data, shared cultural myths, and compared ancestral rituals that seemed to carry precursor echoes. Emily drifted from group to group, answering questions, offering analyses, and absorbing new perspectives. She felt as though she were experiencing the universe open in real time, every interaction revealing another layer of interconnectedness she had never imagined. Kira stayed close, observing her with quiet admiration. "You are different now," they said one evening as the stars drifted past the observation deck windows. Emily shook her head with a wry smile. "I feel the same. I just know more." Kira tapped their chest gently. Knowledge changes the center of the self. When they landed on Valos, the coalition was met with unprecedented celebration. The gathering had become more than a convocation. It was the dawn of a new interstellar era. The High Council of Valos reorganized itself to accommodate representatives from multiple species, forming the first council of the sibling worlds. Emily found herself standing before the newly formed assembly, expected to give a report on the precursor archives and the reconstructed first tongue. She felt nervous, but this time the emotion came with an undercurrent of empowerment rather than fear. When she spoke, thousands listened not because she was human, but because she carried a piece of the puzzle they all shared. Her voice had become a bridge, and with it, she helped them begin weaving a new narrative, one not bound by borders, but by lineage. As weeks turned into months, she helped establish the first interspecies university on the precursor homeworld, where scholars from across the galaxy would gather to study their shared heritage. Emily became the lead architect of the linguistic department, reconstructing the first tongue with a team that spanned more biological diversity than any academic circle in history. She found joy in teaching representatives of species who communicated through sense, vibrations, or color pulses, adapting the precursor structures to each unique biology. It was exhausting, exhilarating work that made her feel alive in a way she'd never experienced. The world felt larger, but also more intimate, as if every discovery strengthened the invisible threads tying them together. On the anniversary of the Ceremony of Echoes, Emily returned to the temple on Valos with representatives from 27 species. The atmosphere shimmered with anticipation as they approached the dais together. When the high priest raised a newly forged staff, the crowd recited in their own languages the ancient ceremonial phrase that had awakened the truth 1 year earlier. "We are the echoes of the past, the voices of the present, the whispers of the future." Emily felt the words resonate deeper than ever, not as a prophecy, but as a promise. The pool of liquid silver rippled softly, not with revelation, but acknowledgement, as though recognizing that its purpose had been fulfilled. The ceremony had once been a bridge to forgotten history. Now it was a celebration of an unimaginable future. Emily stood near the back of the vast chamber as the echoes of the recited phrase faded into a soft harmonic hum, filling the temple of echoes with layered voices woven from dozens of civilizations. The silver pool shimmered gently beneath the shifting light of the 3 aligned moons, though this time it remained calm, no longer swelling with visions or ancient voices. It didn't need to. Everything that once lay hidden had been revealed, and the galaxy now stood united not by myth or speculation, but by shared truth. Emily watched the gathered representatives, scaled, crystalline, gaseous, metallic, chitinous, luminous, each one a living testament to the vast diversity seeded by the precursors. Their different physiologies reflected the beauty of evolutionary adaptation. Yet beneath those differences, she knew their roots traced back to the same ancient world. The knowledge had changed them. She could see it in their postures, their expressions, even in the way they looked at one another. They no longer saw strangers. They saw kin rediscovered after an exile no living creature had intended. When the high priest lowered the staff, the chamber resonated with a final harmonic that drifted outward like a sigh. Emily felt the vibration ripple through her bones, not with the force of revelation, but with the gentle comfort of completion. The ceremony of echoes had reached its full purpose, no longer a petition to ancestors, but a celebration of unity. Delegates began to disperse in small groups, exchanging gestures of respect, and languages blended in ways unthinkable only a year before. Kira approached her with a gentle step, their scales shimmering in deep blues and purples beneath the shifting lights. They watched the dispersing crowd with an expression Emily had learned to interpret as quiet pride. "You have guided us from confusion into illumination," Kira said softly. Emily smiled, though the weight of the praise made her cheeks warm. "I didn't guide anything," she said. "I just happened to understand a few words at the right time." Kira tilted their head, a sign of affectionate exasperation. "Humility, yes. Denial, no. The ceremony changed because you were present. Do not discount the voice that can open a door." Emily let her gaze drift across the chamber again, feeling a mixture of awe and disbelief that she had become such a central figure in a story that spanned epochs. She had never imagined her years studying ancient linguistics would lead her here, to the heart of interstellar unity. She felt a quiet swell of gratitude, mingled with humility, for all the voices and scholars whose work had paved the way long before she stepped into the temple. Their contributions echoed through her every achievement, reminding her that no one person ever made history alone. As the crowd thinned, she found herself walking toward the balcony overlooking Valo's capital, the city glowing beneath the converging moons. The air tasted cool and metallic, infused with a faint crystalline fragrance that always reminded her she was far from Earth, yet never unwelcome. The lights of the city pulsed in gradients, as though reacting to the energy of the ceremony, creating the illusion of a living organism breathing beneath the sky. She stood quietly, letting the gentle breeze settle her thoughts when she sensed another presence behind her. Turning, she saw Maya approaching slowly, their pale scales glowing faintly in the moonlight. They joined her at the railing, their expression contemplative. "You feel the shift, don't you?" they asked softly. Emily nodded. "It feels like the whole galaxy inhaled at once. And now we're all holding our breath, waiting to see what happens next." Maya emitted a soft harmonic that resembled a chuckle. "In a sense, yes. But what you feel is more than anticipation. It is the awakening of shared identity, long buried and finally unearthed." Emily leaned her arms on the railing. "Identity is complicated, especially when it's rewritten overnight." Maya inclined their head. "Identity is never static. It grows, reshapes itself, expands. Today, it expanded more than anyone dreamed possible." Emily remained quiet for a moment, watching the moons. "What do you think the precursors would say if they could see this?" Maya's harmonic softened. "Pride, relief, perhaps even joy. Their final hope was that we find each other and build something greater than they alone could." Emily let that settle in her heart. She wondered whether any civilization had ever truly succeeded at embracing diversity so thoroughly while still honoring unity. What lay ahead felt daunting, navigating the vast differences among species, negotiating old territorial boundaries, confronting centuries of misunderstanding, but also felt possible in a way it had never been before. If they were all branches of the same ancient tree, perhaps the roots were strong enough to hold them together through whatever challenges awaited. In the weeks that followed, the coalition expanded rapidly. Dozens of species sent envoys to Valos, eager to contribute to the growing repository of precursor knowledge. The precursor homeworld became a neutral hub for exploration, research, and cultural exchange. Cities long dormant were revitalized with life, humming with a tapestry of languages and customs weaving together in harmony. Emily became the head of the Interspecies Linguistics Initiative, working alongside scholars of every species to continue reconstructing the first tongue. She relished the challenge, losing herself in equations of grammar, harmonic structures, sensory metaphors, and conceptual frameworks that transcended biology. Every day brought new discoveries, hidden linguistic artifacts encoded in rituals, genetic patterns, or lullabies passed down through generations. She particularly enjoyed working with species whose communication modes differed drastically from human norms. The laman's luminous syntax glimmered through crystalline matrices, translating meaning through spectral shifts. The vor modulated entire sentences through ripples of color and density. The drek used subharmonic pulses layered beneath chitin clicks, forming nuances too fine for human vocal cords to reproduce. Emily found joy in the complexity, her curiosity expanding like a mirrored corridor of endless doors. The galactic library they were building was not merely informational. It was emotional, cultural, and profoundly connective. As more species joined, the project transformed into a living monument to the precursor's vision. One day, she stood in the main archive hall, a massive dome where the reconstructed first tongue was projected across a three-dimensional holographic nexus. Lines of meaning spiraled outward into hundreds of dialect branches, forming a linguistic universe that mirrored the diversity of life across the stars. Kira arrived beside her, marveling at the intricate patterns. "It reminds me of the ceremony of echoes," they said softly. "All these paths meeting in one place." Emily nodded with a smile. "Except this time, we're building it ourselves." Kira turned their head toward her. "That is what makes it more powerful. The ancestors created the framework, but their descendants complete the design." Emily spent much of that year traveling between worlds in the growing coalition, teaching the foundational principles of the first tongue and learning about each culture's interpretation. She visited aquatic cities suspended in oceans of sapphire, floating archipelagos drifting above gas giants, cavern networks lit by bioluminescent fungi, and starships grown from living tissue. Everywhere she went, she felt embraced as a symbol, not of human achievement, but of unity. She didn't always enjoy the attention, but she learned to accept it as part of the role she now played. Her voice was one among billions, yet it had been the catalyst that turned ancient echoes into living progress. On the 10th anniversary of the original ceremony of echoes, Emily returned once more to Valos. The Temple of Echoes had been expanded to accommodate the growing number of species participating. Structures had been added from multiple architectural traditions, blending crystalline spirals with organic arches, luminescent veins, and hovering platforms that shifted with the movement of the crowd. Emily walked through its vast entrance hall, absorbing the sounds of dozens of languages layered in a harmonious cacophony. The silver pool in the central chamber glowed brighter than she remembered, responding to the energy of thousands gathered for the commemorative ceremony. She took her place near the front, just behind the high priest, who now held a reconstructed staff with a multifaceted crystal core. Across the dais stood representatives from more than 24 species, each prepared to speak the ceremonial phrase in their own tongue. Emily felt a swell of emotion rising in her chest, recognizing beings she had worked with closely over the years, and many she had only known through their contributions to the coalition. As the high priest lifted the staff, silence fell over the assembly. The air thickened with anticipation as thousands of voices prepared to harmonize. The high priest lowered the staff with a graceful arc, signaling the recitation to begin. Emily felt the vibration before she heard it, a layered resonance that echoed through the chamber like a heartbeat shared across species. "We are the echoes of the past, the voices of the present, the whispers of the future." The phrase rippled outward in a cascade of colors, tones, pulses, and harmonics, each species adding its unique inflection. Emily spoke in standard, then seamlessly shifted into the ancient Veloan phrase, her voice steady and sure. She had practiced countless times over the years, but speaking it now felt different, rooted not in obligation, but belonging. As the echoes faded, The silver pool rippled gently. There was no eruption of light, no visions of stars or ancient civilizations. Just a subtle shimmer, like a nod from the past acknowledging the present. Emily smiled softly, understanding the message. The precursors had fulfilled their purpose long ago. Now the galaxy moved under its own guidance. The gathered delegates began to disperse once more, though many lingered to share quiet exchanges or offer gestures of unity. Emily turned to Kira and Maya, who had come to stand beside her. She felt their presence like anchors, familiar, steady, and comforting. Kira looked at her, with warmth reflected in their shimmering scales. "Do you ever think about how far we've come since you arrived here in uncertainty?" Emily laughed gently. "More often than I admit." Maya bowed their head. "And yet the journey is still only beginning. There are worlds yet to be found, languages yet to be reconstructed, and connections waiting to emerge." Emily's heart swelled at the thought. The galaxy was vast, their shared heritage even vaster, and the work ahead promised endless discovery. As they walked out of the temple together, Emily felt a deep, abiding hope. She had found her place not as a stranger in a foreign world, but as part of a cosmic family. The circle had closed long ago. What was sundered had become whole. And in that unity, they had found not just history, but a future bound by kinship across the stars.